Well, hey, it is so good to have you with us. If you're here for the first time, I want to welcome you personally. If you're online, thank you for jumping in with us. Just glad that you're here. It is hot outside, and so it feels nice in here. Thank you, Pastor Leroy, for getting the air turned down for us, or figuring that out, and because it does feel better than it did earlier. It was balmy. It was like a balmy 86 up in here, and so this feels good. We finished up a series last week. If you're new here, if you haven't been coming for a while, maybe we usually take an idea, a topic, a passage, maybe sometimes a book or a character, and we'll create a series out of it, and we'll walk through it for a few weeks, and then we'll move on to something else. And that's kind of how we do things here. And so. Every once in a while, there will be a time when there's kind of an in-between, and it's pretty rare, but this is kind of one of those times because next week, if you've been around for the last few years at all, during the summer, during July, we typically have what we call Summer Together, and basically we have some different voices come in, and they'll present, they'll preach and they'll teach over the course of those 4 or 5 weeks. And so you'll hear from different people over the coming weeks. Next week specifically, I'll go ahead and say this since I'm thinking about it. Next week being the 4th of July weekend, we're not going to have services live, okay? So we're not going to be in the building. Now, we will have a pre-recorded message from Pastor Scott Lawrence, who used to be one of our associates here. Whoop, whoop! Those are the people who know him. Because you'd all be cheering. He does. I mean, he's really a fantastic preacher. He's grown so much in the last few years. Matter of fact, he and his wife and his family moved down to south of Orlando, Florida, to plant a church, and that's coming up this fall. And so he's going to be recording us a message, and so that will be. We'll have some worship on there next week, and then followed by his message. And so I just wanted to let you know that. So if you show up and it looks like there's nobody here, it's because nobody's here. So just want to make sure you understand that. Today, though, is sort of my version of this, and so it's like a standalone in-between message, but I felt like this was a good time to present this. I actually prepared this message a few years ago, but I didn't get to preach it because I ended up getting hit in the eye with a limb from a tree. I was bush hogging, and it scratched my eye, and it was very painful. And so Pastor Leroy gets the message about 2 or 3 hours before the service was to start that day, and found out that he was going to have to preach my message, which was so much fun. I'm so glad I don't have to do that. But he is a sport and really did a fantastic job. But I figured, it's been a few years, so this is an opportunity for me to preach it, because I actually was pretty passionate about this particular topic, because it really plays a lot into who we are as a church and some of our vision and how we want to approach the community and the world around us. And so back in the day, we called this How to Stand, and so this is always a timely message, but especially anytime something happens, there's events that occur where we feel so divided, which just feels like all the time these days within our country, and so there's always reasons to kind of pit ourselves against other people, it feels like. There's always a for and against. It's like, this is what I'm for, but I'm against you, and well, this is what I'm for, and I'm against you. And it just feels like there's so much divide, and I know we all recognize that. And so, so this is a message that's really for all of us, but it is especially for those of us who call ourselves Christians. It's like we don't get off the hook here at all. This is extremely important and extremely vital. And so here's what I want to talk about today, and it's this idea of how to communicate what you believe in order to influence people. Now, the reason, here's why we're talking about this, because all of us, everybody everywhere has some version of some very deeply held beliefs and ideas about what is true, about what is right, about what is right and wrong, about what is, even on political issues, what side of the aisle you're on, or what is, how we should treat people, or, what kind of behavior is good or bad. And we've all got some deeply, and here's the thing, when that happens, that those deeply held beliefs that are often very emotional for us, when they get challenged or threatened, we feel the urge, the need, the burden to stand up and to let everybody know it, and to tell them why they're wrong, and to let everybody. We feel like we need to communicate, which is accurate. We do, and that's why we're talking about it. How to communicate that? How do we communicate what we believe? And because we all feel that sense of urgency when it gets threatened or when something presses in. It's like, well, I need to say something. Here is why we're talking about it, though, and you know this is true. And again, this isn't just Christians. This is an everybody thing. Too many people, and you could fill in the word Christian there, but this is an everybody. This is an allscape. Okay. Too many people don't know how to distinguish between making a point and making a difference. That is a significant statement, because we get very passionate about making a point. We get very passionate about communicating a stance or a belief or something that just matters so much to us. And everybody has their thing, right? Like, and some more important than others. And it's like, why do you care so much about that? And they think, why in the world do you not care so much about that? And everybody, it's like everything and in between, can be a very deeply held belief, but especially as Christians, because there are some things that we would say are fundamental, that are foundational, and we need to stand up for these things. And I agree with that. It's more in the how-to and the why that I want to address today, because the why oftentimes is really just about making a point if we're not self-aware. If we're not paying attention, then really our goal is just to do the highlighted word communicate. We just want our voice to be heard. We want our voice to be heard. We want to say our piece. We want to let everybody know why they're wrong and why we're right. And here's what is correct. And you need to believe this. And if you're living this way and that's wrong, like we have all kinds of reasons to stand up. But if that's all we're doing, then let me just say this. If the point is just to make a point, then I promise you it won't make a difference in anybody's life. If your point is to make a point, then it won't make a difference. And yet, and this is where I come back to those of us who are Christians, isn't the point to make a difference? And not just for our voice to be heard. We feel like it's just that our voice needs to be heard. Well, we've just got to take a stand. We've just got to let everybody know that this is biblical, that this is what we believe and we have for 2,000 years, and this is who Jesus is, and we are not. And I'm like, yeah, I get all that, and we are, but the only people who are like going absolutely are the people who already believe that. And everybody's going, who already believe it, and those who don't, they're walking away. And the truth, and yet we're trying to make a difference in people's lives. And so I want us to just shift the focus. I still want us to communicate, but I want us to be able to influence people. So the real question is, how do we become an influencer? I mean, that's kind of the buzzword these days. Everybody who has any kind of following or platform at all, whether they have anything good to say or not, is considered an influencer. I mean, you've seen this. Like, this is like the thing. Oh, I'm an influencer. I'm a social media influencer. It's like, really? Like, what does that mean? Just because you can get people to buy some products? Like, is that what makes you, okay, well, if that's the case, then maybe you're an influencer. But I want to influence people to actually consider some of the things that I believe are true and right. Don't you? I mean, isn't that supposed to be the point? We have a tendency, though, to just want to communicate something, to get our voice heard, and then to turn away and just write people off. That's what we tend to do. But the truth is, as Christians, we don't have a choice. Matter of fact, this was something Jesus mandated to Christians. So we do not get off the hook here. We have to be able to stand. But we have to stand the right way. There's a big distinction there. In other words, this is about making a difference, not just making a point. But Jesus made it real clear that we have to be able to make a difference. And here's why we know that. Because before he left, he said, you, my disciples that he was communicating to at this point, you will be my witnesses. It's you guys. You're going to be a witness to the fact that I was here, that I died for you, that I rose from the grave, and that I have forgiven you. Like, you are my witnesses of the things that I've taught, of the things that I've done. You are it. And that now carries over to you and me. And I mean, we're talking everywhere. Right here at home, our nation around us, all around the world. You are it. You're plan A, and there's no plan B. So we have to be a witness. We have to be able to stand. We have to communicate, but we've got to do it the right way. So how do we do it in such a way? How do we maintain our witness while maintaining influence? That's really the question that I want us to consider today. So this wasn't just something that Jesus said at the end of his ministry and before he left the earth. This was also something that he started out saying. As a matter of fact, he said it all the time in some form or fashion. He was always talking about not just what you need, the things that you need to believe. It seems Jesus was most concerned about how you communicated what you believe and how you acted around people. It's why he would say things. I mean, think about some of the very first words that were recorded that Jesus said. Things like, blessed are those who are merciful. Blessed are those who are peacemakers. Blessed are those who are meek and humble. You are the light of the world. Let your light shine so that people can what? See your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Those are the kind of things he said. He would say, I want you to love your enemies. I want you to love the people who are hard to love, the people who maybe don't love you back. This is who you are to be. And it was always, he wouldn't just say those things, but he would say them in contrast, or while making this contrast between how he wanted his followers to live and what the Pharisees actually did at the time. And so oftentimes he would make this contrast and he would say things accordingly. And so that's where we're going to pick up chapter 7, Matthew chapter 7. This is at the end of what we would call the Sermon on the Mount. It's one of his first recorded messages, probably just a conglomeration of several teachings put into one. But here are some of the things that Jesus said. And again, consider that this, maybe this is the first time you've heard this, but probably not. But here's what I want you to consider. This is something, this is one of those things that you hear Christians and non-Christians say. And most of the time, they don't even know where it's coming from. I just know I've heard that somewhere. I've heard that in the Bible somewhere. Didn't Jesus say, or Paul or somebody, we don't even know. It's just somebody said, I know this is in the Bible somewhere. And so this is one of the things that will be very familiar. You've probably said it, whether you're a believer or not. But I imagine that you've stopped here and that you've taken this a little bit out of context. And so I want us to consider this. Jesus said, do not judge. Don't judge. Don't judge people. Don't be judgmental. Don't be critical. Don't tell people, just how. Don't judge people. And that's what we think of. Now, see, Jesus is addressing this because he knew that the Pharisees were really good at this. They were terribly good at it, at being judgmental and critical. In other words, these were the good doers. Like, they were professional. They were professional holy people. They had it right. They had all the laws, and they were the best at following these things. And it probably all started out being properly motivated, but at some point it became all about that. And so anybody that didn't live and do and say and talk and think the way that they did, they would point the finger. They would point it out. They would say, this is what is wrong with you. And then they would write them off and say, you sinner. And they would, if you're not living right, and walk away from them. They wouldn't have anything to do with them. They separated themselves. They were so holier than thou that they set themselves apart from anybody. And so, but the thing is that anybody didn't know any better, and they just assumed, hey, these guys have got it all together, and so we need to do what they're doing. They aspired to actually follow in the footsteps of these Pharisees, and because they were good at it. I mean, they really respected them in so many ways. Now, it was a bit of a burden, but they respected them. And yet Jesus is coming along and saying, I don't want you to follow along with what they're doing. Don't do like them. Don't judge like they do. What does it mean? I mean, what do we even mean by judgmental in this context? To be judgmental is that we evaluate people, we draw conclusions, and then we write them off. That, to me, is Jesus' version of judgmental, because you could say it a lot of different ways. But I think in this context, it's evaluating somebody, kind of looking at their lives and saying, I see something I don't like about you. Did you see the way she dresses? I know what kind of person she is. We draw conclusions, and then we write them off. I know where they're from. I know what they're thinking. They're never going to turn around. I don't want anything to do with them. I would rather just avoid them. I don't want to be around them. That's what the Pharisees were doing all the time. And he's telling us, don't do that. Don't judge in that way. Don't judge. And then he follows it up and he, clarifies a little bit. Don't judge or you too will be judged. Now here's the thing. Christians and non-Christians alike, we stop right there. This is the one that we pull out and we go, see, Jesus himself said it. Don't judge or you'll be judged. Didn't that, lest you be judged. I mean, we've got all kinds of versions, but this is what we pull out and we just think, this is the problem. I mean, you do need to consider that. It's like, well, I do need to consider, do I really want to be judged? Well, I don't need to judge. Or I don't care, like you can judge me, but I'm judging you. And so we kind of, separate ourselves in that way. And Jesus is saying, no, that's not the point. You're missing the point. You've taken this, you've not heard everything that I have to say. And yet we tend to do that. But is Jesus really saying, don't ever look into somebody else's life, a brother or a sister, and see that there is sin? Because it's like, well, no, I've read some other places. And so what is Jesus talking about? What is he really talking about by saying, don't judge or you will be judged? And so he gives us some context. He says, for in the same way that you judge others, you'll be judged. Oh, okay. And with the measure that you use, it will be measured to you. Oh, okay. So that's something worth considering. Jesus is basically saying that if you're willing to live that way and you're willing to judge somebody, then you just need to be very okay with somebody judging you by the same criteria. That's what he's saying, right? That's what he just said. Whatever measuring stick somebody else, or that you use to kind of measure somebody else's behavior and their life and their belief system and their thought process, whatever measuring stick you use, you need to be willing to receive that same kind of criticism and judgment. So then the question is that you and I should be willing to consider. If we're going to just go ahead with this, we should go, then by what measure do I want to be judged? Are you willing to ask yourself that question? And I'll go first. Do you know what measure by which I want to be judged? None. If I'm being really honest, I would rather somebody just not judge me. Anybody else? Isn't that true? It's like, here's how, if you must judge me though, I want you to judge me mercifully. I want you, let's see, if you must judge me, if there has to be a measuring stick, I want you to know everything about my life. I want you to know the whole story. I want you to know why I believe what I believe. I want you to know the pain that I've endured, the history. I want you to know what my family life was like or my lack thereof. I want you to know my upbringing. I want you to know what was beat into me when I was young. I want you to know my whole story before you go judging me. Okay. That's the measure that I would want to be judged by if I had to be judged. Then we should use that same measure. Does that follow? We should be willing to use the same measure, the same measuring stick, if you will, when we're looking into other people's lives. Isn't that fair? If that's what we would want, then that's what we should use. And I think that's what Jesus is saying. And then he gives us sort of an illustration of this. He says, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye? And this is just, it's not, well, there's a little sin and there's a big sin, okay? This just means that you notice that there's something in your brother's life, in your sister's life, who is, and it needs to be addressed. There's an issue, and you don't think they see it. They believe something that's not true. They act a way that they shouldn't be acting. They're living a way they shouldn't be living, and you feel very strongly about it. But Jesus would say, why is it you only see that? To which we say, when we read that, we're like, see, I told you there was a speck. I knew it. I knew there was a speck. I knew she was dressing bad because, like, I'm just telling you, she's dressing bad. And so I know what kind of person she is. And so there is no hope for her. Or I knew, like, he is so unreliable. He's always showing, where is he? I don't know. He always shows up late. It's like we always notice those things in other people. And it's like, well, why though? Why are you willing to want to not just notice, but then point those things out? Because that's kind of what we do. And I mean, you can scale that up to the big stuff. Like, I mean, come on, like I shouldn't have to spell it out. Like there's an entire gamut of things that we want to point out in other people or in other groups of people. Why do you do that? But pay no attention to the plank in your own eye. Oh, so that's what you're saying. Why do I not point out, why am I willing to notice and to point out this issue that I think is an issue in their life, while I'm not, because he's not saying that it's not there, or that you shouldn't maybe say something about it, or make a stand for this particular thing or issue. He's asking the question though, why are you doing that while not addressing your own mess? Why are you not willing to look in the mirror and really be self-aware and evaluate what's going on in here? Why are you not willing to do that? Because you should be doing that. He says it another way. How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye. Let me make you better. Let me tell you why you believe wrongly. Let me make sure that you're living the right way. You need to be thinking this way. This isn't biblical. This is not ethical. This is not Christian. Why is it, that we're willing to say that? Let me take that out of your eye when all the time there's a plank in your own eye that you're not dealing with. When you've got your own hangups, the problem is that there's so often what I tend to call Christian sin. Like that's kind of my version, my name for it. And there are certain things that in in Christian culture that have just kind of become the okay things. They're just not as big of a deal. Gluttony, not taking care of ourselves, overworking, not treating our family well. I mean, these are the kind of things, procrastination, whatever it is, that are just kind of the okay things. And so they don't matter as much as these, massive, hot button, kind of topics, these big cultural issues. They don't matter as much. And so I don't have to be thinking about those things. I don't have to be too convicted about that stuff. This stuff is what really matters. And we've kind of just become okay and numb to what may be a plank that everybody in the world notices. Everybody else sees it, which is why Jesus turned right around and said, "You hypocrite." And who likes that word? Nobody. Nobody wants to be called a hypocrite. And of course, we're like, but he's talking to the Pharisees. He's talking to anybody who judges this way. In other words, I think Jesus' definition of hypocrite, based on the context that we've just read, would go something like this. Here is a hypocrite, someone who is preoccupied with noticing and pointing out someone else's problems instead of fixing their own. That's hypocrisy. Who is preoccupied with noticing and pointing out, typing about it, gossiping about it, praying about it, sharing about it, pushing people away because of it. We're so preoccupied with that, and yet we're not paying attention to what's going on in our own lives. We're not paying attention to our own mess. And Jesus says that's hypocrisy. And that is the reason that we may be very loud at communicating certain things, but having zero impact. I mean, it just loses something, doesn't it? I mean, that's what how would you define hypocrisy? Your actions don't follow your words. Right? I mean, that would be like the simplest form. That's what Jesus is saying. He's saying, because you're not doing the very thing that you're pointing out in somebody else's life. You hypocrite. Don't do that. First, take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly. Now, let me stop there because I think a lot of Christians, we maybe get to this point, And then we stop because it's like, oh, so I get it now. So this is a self-help kind of thing. This is like, in order for me to begin to address some of the issues in my life, I need to worry about some of those things, and then I can see more clearly. Then I'll have a better view of things. Then I will be a better version of me. And so you're telling me, Jesus, that by noticing some things in other people's lives, it reminds me that I need to be working on me so that I can be better. And we stop there. It's like somehow we make it about ourselves. Christians are so good at this. We make everybody, it's like all of a sudden we take other people's sins and their issues to suddenly make it about who we are. It's like, oh, so this is just a method of me becoming better and getting better at who we are. And this is all of us, by the way. This isn't me trying to step on anybody's toes or trying to be harsh. And there may be some of this like, we can argue about. But like bottom line, let's just look at the words of Jesus. I mean, this is him calling this hypocrisy. And this is in all of us. This is me. I don't mind admitting that. I am self-aware enough to know, my goodness, there are some things that I'm aware of and some things I'm willing to admit this. There are probably some things I'm not aware of that are a mess in my life that I just don't see, that I think I see right, but maybe I don't. Maybe I don't have the complete picture. Maybe I don't have it perfect. Maybe I haven't gotten it all worked out. I feel like it's biblical. I feel like it's right. I feel like it's Christian, and yet there's probably some of it that's just, it's probably not quite right. I'm willing to concede that. But I'm also willing to, I'm constantly thinking, how can I, matter of fact, when I think those things, I think, like, who am I to judge anyway? Like, I mean, if not for my upbringing, if not for, growing up in America, if not for growing up in the Southeast, if not for such, the local church and the influence of my life, if not for my parents, no telling where I would be. And so what if I'm willing to just say, maybe somebody else didn't have any of that? I'm willing to consider that maybe they just think differently because of those things. They didn't think the way that I thought. So I'm just always willing to try my best to work that out. And I think that's what Jesus is asking us to do, but not to stop here. It's not just about me. This is about seeing clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. You see, this is the part we tend to leave out because really we just want to point out the problem. And even if we're willing, it's like, but I'm working on myself, I'm doing it. But really, Jesus wants us to be able to see clearly so that we can then help our brother. You see, following Jesus does not stop with what's in it for me. It's not, I see the problem in them. It reminds me that I've got issues, so let me go get better. No. It doesn't stop there. It's so that you can then turn around and provide something to somebody else, that you can show somebody the truth in love, so that you can present something and communicate something in love, so that you can actually influence them. Shouldn't we, as Christians, want people to want to be in a place like this who think completely different than us? Otherwise, where else are they going to hear the things that we say we believe? Because they're probably not listening to the people who are arguing with them online. And so I would rather them be here. And I don't mind preaching. I mean, if you've been around for any length of time, I don't mind saying things from this stage. But my goal is to try to say it in such a way, to communicate it in such a way that it actually creates some influence. That's my goal. I think having a relationship with somebody so that they know you actually care for them and love them actually is what creates influence. It gives you a voice. We don't have a voice when all we're doing is pointing out and being judgmental and critical. And then we don't like it when the tables turn and people judge us and are critical. It's like, well, I don't like it. I don't like that. And yet this is what I want us to see. Jesus actually commands us as followers of Jesus to address our issues. I think this is kind of the point. To prepare us, in order to prepare us to help others with theirs. This is the whole package. This isn't about us being good little boys and girls. That's religion. That's all about behavior and lifestyle. But if following Jesus is about a relationship with Him in order to have a relationship with others, then you know where it means that we should be willing to walk is right in the messy, messy middle. It doesn't mean that you don't believe in one direction or another, but it means I'm willing to have a conversation with people because I actually want to influence them. I actually want to have a conversation. I want this to be dialogue. I don't want this to just be me communicating something at the top of my lungs and then I walk away because they're not worth my time. They bother me. I don't really like them. I'm awkward. I'm a bit of a phobe around those kind of people, and so I'd rather just not be around them. And doggone it, that's what the majority of people who are outside the church kind of think. And we've got a lot of work to do to fix that. But it's not going to happen by taking a harder stance. Yes, we need to know exactly there is a middle ground here, people. Like, yes, you need to know what you need to know. But guess what? That doesn't need to be the first thing that gets communicated to somebody. They just need to know that you actually care before they care that you know. Thank you, John Maxwell. Here's why I think we've lost some influence, because this is, as we wrap this up, and because I don't know if you can tell, it's kind of a big deal to me. This was a lot of what gave us this idea to start this church. We had this idea. It's why we're not denominational, not because we don't love some denominations and, you know, the evangelical church. We love local churches of all shapes and sizes. The reason we didn't is just so that it didn't draw a line for us. Because it's an unnecessary line. There's some certain lines that we're going to be very clear on and draw. But they're going to be very fundamental to who we are as evangelical believers, Christians, followers of Jesus for the last 2,000 years. That's where we're going to, it's going to be hard and fast. But there are some things that are just going to be, we're willing to be in a relationship with somebody. We're willing to allow that to happen first before we just draw a line in the sand and then they don't want to be here. They don't come back. And that's who we are as a church. I think it's who we need to be just as Christians, as believers. My goodness, that creates influence. It gives us a voice, the voice that we so long for. The problem is that our version of standing up for our faith and what we believe is true and right often comes, not always, but often comes in the form of being critical, judgmental, and condemning. That is what is generally the perception of the church. I can't go there. I can't tell you how many times when I was in college and kind of those, formative years for me, I would meet somebody and I would invite them to my church. And they would tell me, they were completely unchurched. And they would say something like, I can't come to church because I would burst into a ball of flames right when I walked in the door. You ever heard anybody say that? Have you ever been the one who has said that in the past? Like, seriously? Like, because nobody thinks that's actually true. What do they mean? I would feel very condemned and judged and criticized because of my lifestyle and what I did the night before, and perhaps how I dressed. That's really what they mean. Well, I just wouldn't be comfortable there. I don't think this is somewhere I can be. So this is what I want us to see. And again, there's a laundry list of things we could put here. But I just want us to consider a couple of things on how to be an influencer, an actual influencer. Somebody who actually in order to create enough of a platform in a person's life or a group of people's lives, in order to be able to communicate something in such a way that they consider it. Okay, so that's what I mean by being an influencer. And here's what I think needs to happen. This is a tough one, even though it's really simple. Before you do, say, or type anything, make sure you have addressed your own mess first, or that you're at least aware and in the process. I mean, you can put that at the end if you want. It just got a little long. I'm not saying don't do, say, or type something. Don't hear me saying that. I'm just saying before you do, be willing to look inward and consider that there is a plank, that there is a mess, that there are some things that aren't quite right, that aren't perfect. And are you aware? But not just aware, you're addressing those things, you're doing something about them, you're dealing with those things, you're removing those things from your life slowly but surely. It's not a game of perfection. I didn't say make sure you're perfect first. No, it just means that you are so aware. You know what that does, man? It allows you to be real and authentic with people. It's why, this is the reason I get up here and I say crazy things like, man, you know what? I mean, I struggle with terrible thoughts sometimes. I shared last week, I said, I've had that thought of like wanting to run somebody over and then back up and do it again. Do you know why I say things like that? Not just because they're true, but because I think that helps make me more relatable. So that when I say what I'm about to say, maybe you'll go, oh, so it's not just me. He's not saying it's just me. It's like all of us. That's why. I mean, it's the same thing. Like I'm not just up. I don't mind saying certain things, but I want to set the stage. I want you to know that I'm with you on this. Like these are my same struggles. Being the guy with the microphone does not eliminate these temptations and the difficulty. In some ways, it makes it more difficult. Because I'm constantly feeling that judgment. To say the right thing, to do it the right way. But my goodness, there are people around you who need us so desperately to love them where they are. And then, like to be working on ourselves and not to not point some things out, not to not, this is the difference. I think you can honestly judge. We just don't like the word. I think you can judge without being critical. You can judge without being judgmental. But the only way that happens is when there's relationship. To judge something is to kind of weigh and look and say, yeah, I see something here. The problem is that it always comes with baggage. It always is so judgmental. But we can do better. We can judge. We can notice things and point things out in other people, but only when we're addressing it in ourselves. And then, watch this. This is so important. Once you have done, said, or typed, don't walk away. Even if it's uncomfortable. This is where we've struggled. Because we have wanted to so distance ourselves and to draw so many lines and to create such a separate place just for us where we can kind of do our thing and don't come in here and be a part of that. I mean, don't walk in here dressed like that. Don't walk in, and maybe we wouldn't say it in so many words, but we thinking it. Little haughty-taughty walking in here with that dress, like those. We don't mean to, but man, we've just gotten so used to it. And it's like, well, who are you? Like, you got no problems? How about you love her? And what if you knew her story and you saw her upper thighs underneath that dress and all the scars that are there? I actually had that happen to me at one point. Now, I didn't see the scars, but she talked about them. But it wasn't before I had, been weighing kind of who she was and what kind of girl she must be like. This was in the last few years. It's like, oh my goodness. Can't believe she wants to date my kid. Oh no, she didn't. I can't believe she dresses like that. Have you seen her Instagram? Those are those thoughts. Come on, parents. And I mean, rightly so, dadgummit. Like, I'm a parent, and it's like, I'm a Christian, I'm a pastor, and no chance this is happening. And then I find out that she has been a cutter since she was a child. And on her shoulders and on her forearms and on her thighs, there are white scars everywhere. And she is carrying that burden. It changed my perspective. I suddenly had compassion. Come on, and those are the visible scars. How many are internal? I mean, my goodness, who are we? We've all got our own. But until we're addressing our own, we won't see clearly. We're not willing to see clearly. We're not wanting to get the whole picture. We're not wanting to spend the time that it takes and the awkward conversations and maybe the judgments from outside, because you were seen hanging out with that person or that group of people, or because, that couple showed up at our church and actually came for a little while. Oh man, we've gotten some flack over that one in the past. It's like, it didn't say a thing about what we believe, but it said a lot about who we wanted to love. Come on? Do you see? I mean, there's the difference. I want to have influence with people. I want the same thing that every other Christian does. I want people to know truth. I want people to know Jesus because he's the one that ultimately changes lives. But they're not going to hear Jesus if all they hear is criticism and judgment and condemnation and rebuke. We always, every day, it's never too late. We always have an opportunity. And it could start right here with 5 of you. 10 of you, 50 of you. And it would begin to make a massive impact on the people around you, the people in this community, and it could have a ripple effect. I mean, what if, just imagine if 10% of Christians across the globe really, really got this. I think that could light a fire. I do. Like, I really believe that. It wouldn't have to be like everybody's getting it, because guess what? Everybody ain't getting it. But I'm not giving up on them either. I'm not giving up on me. I'm not giving up on you. I want us to get this because it's going to impact. If you want to make a difference in the next generation that we're so concerned about, then we'll do something about this. Would you bow your heads? I would be willing to bet that there are some people here who are on opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to this issue. Some of us are thinking, whatever, that's not who we are. And then on the other end, it's like, yeah, that's the very thing that I was scared to even come today because I felt like I was going to be judged. And then there's everybody in between. But here's the truth. Here's the truth. We all need Jesus. We all need Jesus. He's the difference maker. He's the life changer. And we need to receive him in order to be able to even get started seeing clearly. We have to start with a relationship with Jesus. That's where it begins. Don't give up on Jesus because of some judgmental Christians. Don't do that. Give Jesus an opportunity to change you, to give you the hope that he wants to give you. I want to give you an opportunity just to receive that right now. Let me just say this, a prayer, to follow along with a prayer. It does not fix you or save you. But if what you're praying is true in your heart, that you believe that Jesus is your Savior, then it will be so. So I'm just going to ask you right where you are. If that's your position, if that's what you know is true in your life, would you just pray something like this? Heavenly Father, I confess that I'm a sinner and I need a Savior. I believe His name is Jesus. I struggle with hypocrisy just like everybody else. I struggle with being judgmental and critical and condemning just like everybody else. I don't want that anymore. I want to receive the love of Jesus in my life so that I can see clearly in order to give the love of Jesus in other people's lives. So Jesus, I ask that you would send your Spirit to fill me, to change me from the inside out, to renew me in my life, because I want to walk with you. Heavenly Father, I thank you because I know that there are some people in this place or maybe watching online who have made that decision and it is true for them. And they just know, maybe all of the criticism and the judgment and maybe they recognize that those are just barriers to you, that those are just distractions. Those are things that are just getting in the way of what they really deep down thought was true all along. And Lord, I praise God for that they recognize that you are the lover of our souls. Not just a creator, not just a sustainer, but that you desire to live within us. And you are the lover of our soul, of your creation. And we can be wrapped up in your arms today. God, I thank you for that. My prayer for everybody here who is a believer, that they would have the wisdom to know what to do with the things that they've heard today, but then the courage and the willingness to do it. And I pray it in Jesus' name.